Welcome to episode 224 of the Daniel Yoris podcast with today's guest, Gary Chupik. Let's go. Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. Joined here today by Gary Chupik. Gary, thank you so much for being here. Fellow Canadian.
Thanks for having me.
Fellow Canadian from a very different part of Canada, now living in the US and doing your thing. Gary, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what it is that you do?
Yeah, I'm a mental performance coach from Seattle, Washington, and I work with professional athletes and more business people who are understanding that mental performance in the sports world is so applicable to mental performance in the business world. And so I would say at the beginning of my work, it was working predominantly with athletes. And then over time, the last few years specifically, that it went to 90-10, then 80-20, then 70-30. Now it's 50-50. So I enjoy working in the business world and sort of exploring what mental performance looks like in the business world, in addition to my work with athletes.
And how is it that you fell into this? Because I think that these kind of mental performance, anything to do with psychology or therapy, if you will, not that what you do is therapy necessarily, but anything to do with this is like kind of new and like pretty well accepted now, but maybe not so common 10, 15, 20, certainly not 30 years ago. So how did you fall into this?
Yeah, I mean, everybody's got a different story, and mine certainly, it feels mundane to me, but when people hear it, it's like, oh, that's kind of an interesting path. But what I find is that most of the people in my profession have an interesting path to wherever they are. And Trevor Moawad, who was my mentor and superhero, he was working with Russell Wilson from the Seattle Seahawks at the time, and he was working with Alabama and Miami Dolphins. I mean, he was the top of Mount Everest when it comes to mental performance. And I was just privileged enough to meet him on a blind date and during COVID, a little earlier than that, but just kind of around that time. And we just kind of hit it off and we began to meet monthly. And he said, you should really think about like doing this mental performance stuff. Like, I think you'd be really good at it. And so he said, if you were to work with an athlete or a team, like what process would you take them through? And at that point in my life, I had put in about 1,000 hours of study into sports psych, and I put together a process, and he hired me on the spot. And then I began a little bit of work with him and his team, and then I went out on my own, kind of doing my own thing. So, he was a teacher, he was an educator, he wasn't a sports psychologist. But he was very good at what he did and had connections. And, a lot of life is about who you know, not what you know. And I think you have to be good at what you do, but a lot of it is relationships. And so I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. And then my life from that point on has been sort of a story book of meeting the right people at the right time and doing my very best and doing what I know. And, learning constantly along the way about how to do mental performance and run a business at the same time. It's just kind of like for you, you have what you know professionally, but then it's like, man, this is a business too, and you have to learn it. And so in the same way, learning how to talk to professional coaches, learning how to talk to college coaches, knowing how to talk to business people, they're just all acquired skills. No one's naturally talented at running a business, right? You just have to learn the ins and outs of it. And some people can learn it quicker than others, I suppose, but we're all different and wired differently. And so some things are a little bit harder, some things are easier, but that's kind of how I got into it, is just being in the right place at the right time and paying my dues and putting my work in, but at the same time, having a lucky break every now and again. So I think that education and study, I mean, that's just the hard work. That's the grind of going uphill into the wind. But every now and again, you need to take an elevator up. And I think relationships are the elevators.
Very well said. One thing that I want to zero in on there is the putting your time in and paying your dues. One thing that I think is a big misconception about elite performers or people who reach very high levels of success is that people often say things like they got lucky. They happen to be in the right coffee shop at the right time. They happen to, they hit someone at a red light. They bumped their bumper, and it happened to be some guy, and they hit a great relationship and got scouted to a team or got hired by a company, or like these random happenstances. And for sure, like those kind of maybe more extreme examples can happen, but a lot of it is also in building your own luck, and also I think being prepared for when opportunity presents itself. If pick your favorite football team holds an open walkout tryout, if you haven't been training you're not just going to show up and make the team. You have to be in shape. You have to kind of get ready so that when the time comes, you can perform. Um, is that something that you often face in coaching people, where they say that, you know, so and so, they just got lucky. They were born with the silver spoon.
Yeah, no, it's very true. Like I say that presumptuously with the understanding that you've put in the work, right? Like, so one of my favorite things in the entire world to say is that, and it's a motto that I live my life by, is that you can't control outcomes, but you can always put yourself in the best position to succeed.
Mm.
And so, yeah, I mean, you can throw the best pitch in the world and it could be hit for a dinger. I just saw one the other day. It was like 2 inches off the ground and a guy dings it for a home run, and they win the game from that home run. Like, you can throw the best pitch in the entire world, it still get hit and you can still lose. So you can't control the outcomes, but you can always put yourself in the best position to succeed. So when I talk about being in the right rooms, yeah, I was in the right rooms intentionally. I worked hard to be in those rooms. And yeah, it's like a cultivating relationships and cultivating your skill in particular areas. So yeah, maybe it sounds a little bit sort of like happenstance, but it's really not. It's really like you are prepared to be. And then when you get your shot, you got to shoot it. And being prepared in those moments, I can't tell you how many times I've shown up at things and prepared and nothing happened. But on the other hand, I can't tell you how many times that something did happen and I did get a shot at something. And so you just kind of never know, but you always have to be prepared. And I think in order to be successful at anything you do, you have to be confident. Like, that is like, priority A1 is for you to be confident in what you do. And it's not a blind confidence. It's no, 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 no. There's two ways to build confidence. Number one is to be prepared. So preparation. And if you're not prepared, like if you're going to go give a speech or something, and if you're not prepared, you have no reason to be confident other than just sort of, negligence or ignorance or something. But you're prepared. And number two, you prove things to yourself.
Mm.
And to me, I mean, you can talk about confidence in lots of different ways, and I think that's kind of like a faux confidence. But I think if you really want to be confident and you want to be sure that you deserve to be where you are, you're prepared and you prove things to yourself on a consistent basis.
And they don't always have to be gigantic things. Like, confidence can be
Yep.
stacking up small wins over time, so that you have at least the foundation, so that when the big thing comes, like, you can do it. One thing I'm
Yeah.
thinking about is,
Oh,
what
sorry.
is
Go ahead.
some sorry, what is some tactical advice for getting yourself in the right rooms for the person who is trying to climb the corporate ladder, more or less ish, the type of person that's probably listening to this, not so much entrepreneurs. They might be hearing this and say, well, sounds all good and well. I want to, get out there and do things, but I don't know what to do. How do you go about actually navigating that? Like, how do I start getting myself out there to put myself in the right room, assuming that I've, done the work and I'm good at what I do?
Hmm. Yeah, that's an excellent question. For me, it was about finding the right mentors and finding the right people that invited me into those rooms, because I'm not sure I'm always have the quality or the consistency to sort of go navigate that for myself. And the reason why I say that is because in the professional world, like for example, take a professional franchise for example, it's got like 100-foot iron wall around it. And the only way that you penetrate that wall is relationships. It's not because you're that good or you're that talented. That almost never happens. It's who do you know that puts you in a position to be able to be invited into that. And if you think about it, it makes logical sense. Like, you have access to, let's say, 50 millionaires and they're all in one place, right? And the trust factor has to be so high to be invited into those rooms. It's pretty important. So I think just knowing the right people and having a mentor or someone that's championing you, I think that makes all the difference in the world. And so it's not just about like, who you know, or it's not just about randomly being in certain events or networking events, but it's really having someone who says, I think I believe in you. And I think you're really good at what you do. And, for all the imposter syndrome that I might have, when a guy like Trevor Moed says, I think you're really good at this. Like, you should do this. Well, I think that does wonders for your confidence as well, by having a mentor in your life that says, yeah, I think you show a lot of potential in this area.
Would you say that this ability to build, create, and nurture relationships is one of the biggest differentiators between elite performers and not elite performers?
Yeah, there's a great book written, Who Not How. And I think we often think about like, how am I going to do this? When in reality, it's really about the who. I remember Bill Belichick giving us, he was on a podcast one time and he was talking about like, he goes like, everyone thinks that we're brilliant people. We're actually really not. We're all just pretty average or pretty good at what we do. But you put all of us together in one room, we can become great. And I've never forgotten when he said that, because I was like, oh, wait a minute. Like, there's power in team and there's power in doing things together. And you can only go so far doing things yourself. And so having the right people or being a part of a team that can champion you, I think that's pretty powerful.
I want to make a quick fitness analogy here with the team aspect and playing off what you just said about Bill Belichick and how all the members of the team are kind of average. I think that one of the things that people think is that they need to be extremely highly proficient in lifting, in dieting, and counting macros, and knowing all the supplements, and getting their sleep dialed in, and like doing all the stuff perfectly. And I think a way better analogy is if you pick each of those aspects as a team member, you don't have to be amazing at all of them, because chances are, if you're like super dialed on your lifting, your nutrition might slip, or your sleep might slip, or something else. But if you're just like kind of average at all of them, and you just do all of those things more or less all of the time for a very long period of time, like that is how you become fit. And so there's the kind of like, the business fitness analogy here on teamwork, because at the end of the day, fitness is it's a solo pursuit, right? You're in the gym, you're lifting weights, only you can do it. And sure, you can have support and coaching and mentorship and, lifting buddies and like, and all this stuff. But at the end of the day, like you've got to get in there and do the work. So that's the analogy there. Is there anything that you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. I saw a study one time on high intensity workouts, right? Like hit workouts. And people talk about the afterburn, like you're burning calories all throughout the day. And according to the study, it was like the afterburn of burning that many calories was so minimal that it could be gone in like an apple, or
Yeah.
eating an apple with peanut butter. And like your overemphasis on this nuance is not serving you well. And so and to go back to your point, it was like, it was just about being consistent with what you were doing and be committed to being consistent. And I like to say, like, work on perfecting the simple things, and the outcomes will come. So yeah, I'm a big believer in just doing the simple things and being consistent, and over time I think it pays off. There's a great book, when Chris Peterson, the coach of the Washington Huskies, went from Idaho to Seattle, from Boise State to Seattle with the Huskies, he had this book that he said, you cannot be on my coaching staff unless you read this book. So he was head coach of the Huskies at the time, and people don't realize how prolific Chris Peterson of a coach, head coach Chris Peterson was. If you take away his first year of taking over a terrible program at Washington, he's one of the top three most winningest coaches in NCAA history.
Wow.
That's how prolific of a coach Chris Peterson was. And in fact, he might even be number one, and which is remarkable to even think about. But so here's a guy that's saying, after, in his words, and this is his words, after the Bible, the most influential book in the world for him was a book about making things simple and being consistent. And so it was by Chris Olson, and the name is just kind of hovering over my head. It was called The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson. And the whole book is about, like, man, don't expect miracles. Like, it's just about consistency. And after he mentioned that book and I went and picked it up, I was like, oh, now I see what he's saying. Like, the it's like the eighth wonder of the world is just consistency and building off yesterday's successes. Now I know why he wanted every coach on his staff to read that book. And so, yeah, I appreciate the emphasis on, like, listen, like, don't expect miracles here. Like, just put in the work, but over time, it'll really pay off.
What are some strategies that you employ for either yourself or your clients, or that you notice from these elite performers, that allows them to be consistent? And it can be with their fitness, or with the mundaneness or the mundane things that they do in their sport or their profession. Because we've all got things. Nobody wants to go for a 10-minute walk after every meal. It's not boring, or it is boring. It's not that cool, but it helps a lot. No one wants to, you know, review your, I don't know, whatever corporate stuff that you, I can't even think of an example because I'm so far out of the corporate world. But whatever boring corporate stuff, no one wants to do it, but like it helps you a lot if you just do it for 10 minutes a day. So what are some of the strategies that you employ to actually help people to stay consistent with the boring things for long periods of time?
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's a couple things. Number one, it's, I mean, the word habits is a dirty word. Like it's just so hard for people. But I'd like to substitute the word habits if that's like has a visceral negative, reaction for some people. Just use the word rhythm. So you just really have to find out your rhythm. So if you think about a professional NFL player, you think about the rhythm that they have on a weekly basis. So every Monday they do the same thing. Every Tuesday, every Wednesday, every Thursday, every Friday. So they get into the solid rhythm of what their day looks like. And to a T, it's almost the same every day. It might have some tweaks here and there, but it's pretty much the same thing every day. They get up at 6 a.m. or 6:30. They're at the facility at 8. And then they have a little bit of a check-in breakfast, a little bit of a snack, and then it's practice at 10, and then they practice till 11:30. They have lunch, and then they have positional meetings at 1:30, and then at 3 o'clock they do a team practice till 5, and then they go home, spend the evening with their families, and then Tuesday it's rinse and repeat. Like it's the same thing. And what you find with high performers is that they have a very boring life in some respects if you want to be outstanding at something. So it's just like if you do the same thing every day, yeah, you get good at it. It's just like playing an instrument. If you play it every day, you get really good at it. Even if you're not good at it in the moment, you will get good at it and you will improve. And so just noticing how athletes and other high performers in other industries, it's like, no, 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 no. Be bored. Be okay being bored doing the same thing, and quit putting different keys in the lock to unlock the performance door. Like it doesn't really work. And so you keep trying different, well, I'll try this. Well, I'll try this. Well, I'll try this. And I'm like, listen, it's just lacking the consistency of doing the same thing over and over and over again and perfecting the simple to the point where you just realize that if you just keep doing it that way. And so they have a love affair with progress. And what I mean by that is there was a study done that said that the brain doesn't know whether, and this is so applicable to the fitness world, the brain actually doesn't know whether, if you, let's say you're on the elliptical machine and you go 10 seconds more or 1 minute more or 10 minutes more, your brain actually doesn't know the difference. All it knows is that it's making progress. That's all that it knows.
Hmm.
And like if you do 10 seconds more a day of something, and you just like you'll remember that all day long that you did 10 more seconds, like in physically or mentally, is that even a thing? Like you did it, like good for you, you did it 10 more seconds, but your brain just experiences that as progress. So like I hate the rowing machine. I have like I have a love hate relationship with the rowing machine. And I remember when all I could do is like I'd have to if I just doing 10 minutes at level 3, I'd have to stop like 3 times. Just so it took me 2 weeks to do the rowing machine at level like 2 or 3 before I could do it for 10 minutes without stopping. But then all I did was add a minute every single weekday. And I add up to the point where I was doing 57 minutes a day at level 8 and not even breathing hard, doing the entire thing with nasal breathing. And I could get off and have a perfectly good conversation, but I was trucking the entire time. And so what that is a testimony to is that, listen, if you just, the temptation to do, go from 18 minutes to 23 minutes is high, but just do 19 minutes and just like teach yourself to just stay in your rhythm and do your thing. Because after a while you say, well, if I can do 19 minutes, I can do 20 because you've already proven it to yourself and you're prepared to do it. So it just makes everything so easy that I was doing 53 minutes and making it easy, and it was easy. And so people would say, man, you do 53 minutes, how long did it take you to do that? You're such a great, I'm like, I don't, wait a minute, why are you saying I'm a great athlete? Like, it took me forever to get here, but now because of my consistency and my progress, then you can. And so I think in terms of like whether you're in business or whether it's fitness or whether you're a professional athlete, it's just make progress no matter how small it is. Just make progress. And if you can track the progress, it's even better, but because you measure what matters to you. And so if you just stay consistent with it, man, you'd be amazed at what you can do.
Man, so well said. And like this is the exact reason why I'm so big on people with tracking their workouts. Because for the
Mm,
exact reason that you just said, if you always do 10 minutes and that's just like what you do, how will you ever know that you're getting better if you don't track it? You might do 10 and a half minutes, but you wouldn't even know if you never track it. Or if you did 8 reps of 50 pounds this week and you don't even remember by the time it's the next week rolls around, you're like, oh, did I do 50 pounds or was it 45 or 50, like what was it? And you have no idea if you're even making progress because you're just doing stuff. And by all means, like it's still fine. It's just not as good as it could be. And it's probably even more pronounced in the business world because like things are more direct and they're more measurable. Like your fitness progress can kind of be just like you can kind of get away with whatever a little bit, but if you're not closing deals, you're not answering emails, you're not showing up to meetings, you're not like doing these very specific things. I feel like you won't get away with it as much as kind of just like messing around in the gym. Sometimes you can mess around in the gym, and as long as you consistently mess around in the gym, you'll kind of be okay. But it's boring, and then you actually don't do it for long enough, and that's the real thing because we crave progress. I think we
yeah.
all want this, right? And so being able to track it is like, okay, I can see I did 8 last week, I did 9 this week, I'll do 10 next week, and or what and extrapolate that to whatever you need to.
Yeah, and I had it's such a great point. And what's weird is that I really like to stress test what I teach. And so you just wonder, okay, if I change the environment, does this still work? So I had a friend of mine who was addicted to cigarettes, and he was like, "Hey, can you help me kick cigarettes?" As a mental performance coach, I'm like, I don't know. Like, I've done, some recovery stuff before, but I certainly wouldn't have thought of like using mental performance as the differentiator. But he asked me if I would try it. And I was like, okay. So he was like a cigarette. He was like smoking like 30 cigarettes a day. Like it was like a lot. And so I said, well, you know what? For this upcoming week, for the entire week, I just want you to smoke 29. And he's like, what are you talking about? Like, are you kidding me? And he goes, I thought we were going to figure out how to do 20 and 15 and 10. I'm like, no, no, no. We're just going to do 29. So have at it for 29. And the reason why I was doing that was, of course, it was slow progress, but I needed to rewire his mind, and I needed it to be slow. I didn't need it to be fast. I needed it to be slow so that he could figure out mental pathways to figure out his identity, because he has tied his identity with his addiction, right? And so just do 29. So then we did. So of course this is like a long-term project, right? Like it's a lot of weeks. Like 30 weeks is a lot of weeks. But he made it down to, I remember he made it down to like 20, and he was feeling so good. He was like, he was figuring it out. And he goes, you know what? I think I'm going to do 15 this week. I was like, don't do it. Don't do it. Like, first of all, don't mess with success, right? But don't
Right.
do it. And but he didn't want to listen to me. So he went down to 15 or 12 or whatever it was. He did it for about 3 days, and then he fell off he fell off the cart. Right. So I was like, hey, let's go back to 19. Let's just do 19. He made it down all the way to 1 cigarette per day. And then he got to the point where he's like, why am I doing one a day? That's so dumb. Like I made it this far, and he kicked the habit.
Amazing. I think that one thing that I pick out of that story is that we this is again I'll relate to fitness, but we often forget what the actual goal is. And
Mm,
so the goal in your friend's story there was to quit cigarettes, not to quit cigarettes faster than anybody else. It was to quit cigarettes. And so the fitness thing is like you wanted to, lose 15 pounds. The real goal is to not lose 15 pounds in 2 weeks. It's to lose 15 pounds and then like lose it for forever and never gain it back. And so those are two very different things.
mm,
And so when you try and mix them up and you forget what the real thing is, what the real goal is, then that's when you start playing games. Well, I'll just skip ahead. I'll go to 15 instead of 20 cigarettes a day, and then you lose. You make a mistake because that's not the road to the goal or the destination that you're trying to actually get to. If the goal was to quit cigarettes as fast as possible, then your entire approach would have been very different. You would have probably just thrown out the cigarettes and made them live at your house for a week and said, I'll just I'll make sure that you don't smoke any cigarettes. Right? It would have been a very different thing and maybe not as effective. But so I think keeping the main goal, the actual main goal, is probably another important part of this. Like, it's great to be consistent, but you've also got to be consistent at at the things that are getting you to where you want to get to, not just being consistent for consistency's sake.
Yeah, and you asked a little bit earlier, like what specific tactics can we use? And so there's one called Win the Day that I use a lot with athletes, and it's when you pick five or seven. You can only pick one of them, five or seven, not six, not less, not more, either five or seven. And we do an odd number because you either win the day or you don't. There's no ties. It's either a W or an L. And so what I want them to do is figure out what are the five things I can do today that put me in the best position to have a great day. So five or seven things. So we just, and it's because it's them and they get to choose them based on their identity and who they are. They have a pretty easy idea. Like, okay, typically it's nutrition, eat well, it's get at least 6 hours or 7 hours of sleep. And then a myriad of other things, whatever they decide. But they get to choose what puts you in the best position to handle that day really well. And once they pick those, then they have those five or seven things. And then what I have them do is print off a Google, calendar into their closet. And every day you either get an L or you get a W. That's just the way that it goes. And you got to be brutally honest with yourself. So if you did four out of the seven things, you got a W. Good for you. Let's try and do better. Let's try and do like five of those things or six or even seven of those things and get the shutout. And what I find is that when people start to put W's together, it's a miracle, right? They start to feel better about themselves.
Right.
And so what are the things that put you in the best position to succeed during that day? So you can't control an outcome, but you can certainly control the things that put you in the best position to succeed. And so I call it changing their mode of it's kind of like changing their modus operandi, or sort of changing their locus of control. So if
Mm-hmm.
they have an internal locus of control, they get to decide what puts them in the best position to have an excellent day. If it's an external modus operandi, then they'll determine the success of their day by the things that happen to them. Well, you have no control over those things oftentimes. So
Right.
what if we change the locus of control from external to internal, and you get to decide on those seven things and judge the success of your day by those seven things and whether you did them or not. That way, when difficult things do come your way, whether it's difficult news or a challenge, you're in so much of a better position to handle those things because you've chosen to live with an internal locus of control. So I call it win the day. And I would say for everyone in the fitness world, determine what your five or seven things are and be ruthlessly honest with yourself about tracking that and string together W's, because two W's in a row, that's a good little, like, you get three, that's a good winning streak. You get four or five, now you have momentum. And the goal is to create enough momentum in your life where things become easier because you're putting together and daisy chaining all these W's, and you start to feel really good about your life, and you're capable of what you said earlier, of accessing, being able to access different parts of your life and to succeed at those things.
I really, really love that. I think that one of the things with the internal and external locus of control, something that I've often said is like, if you think that you can't control the things that are happening in your life, that's a terrible place to be, because it
Mm-hmm.
also means that you can't do anything to fix it.
Mm.
Whereas if you take ownership of all the good and all the bad, even when you mess up, it's okay, because I control it, that means that I can fix it. If
Yeah.
I have no control over this, then I'm doomed for forever to be in this cycle of taking L's. And no one wants to be in that cycle. So if you take ownership over the things that happen to you, then you can go ahead and win those things. Win the day. You can win that idea. You missed the workout. Well, it's not because of the rain and the traffic and my kids and whatever else it was because I didn't budget my time properly. I didn't set out my clothes. I whatever thing it is that happened to you. Therefore, you can fix that the next day. You're not going to fix the weather
Yeah.
tomorrow. Like, that's not going to happen. So you got to
Yeah.
keep it internal so that you can do something about it, and that's a good place to be.
Hmm. Yeah, and let me share one of my exercises with your
Mm-hmm.
audience that is
Please.
probably the best exercise that I have. And let me just share it with you because I
Excellent.
think it's so valuable, because it comes back to the control issue. So it's called the perspectives exercise. And so you make four columns. What's going right in your life right now? What's going wrong, or what feels wrong? What feels like it's confusing? and what feels like it's missing. And so you have them write out those in those four categories. I sometimes I add a fifth category, what feels overwhelming, because it gives me a window into kind of like what they're really wrestling with. So let's say there's those five columns. And then what you do with each of those five columns beside each of those things that they list, I want them to determine or identify what their controllability is. None, partial, and full. And so what they think is that there's so many things happening in their life that they don't have any control over, and it's simply not true. It's just their
Mhm.
perception. So there's difference between perspective and perception. Perception, like a lot of people will say, well, this is my perspective, and then you get somebody else say, well, this is my perspective. That's actually not true. It's actually they're sharing just their perception of reality, what they think is reality. So think of like a diamond, right? Like they're just sharing their perception of their angle, of the angle in that diamond. But they don't necessarily have perspective. But when they talk to you or they talk to each other and you all converse, and now you have perspective. But people are just sharing their perceptions of things. So in this circumstance, they might have a perception that they don't have control over all these different things in their life when in reality they actually do. So they might have partial control, um, or they have full control over it. They just don't understand or realize that they have full control over this. And so what we're doing is we're building self-efficacy into them, right? Like we're saying that, we want to empower you to make different decisions in your life. And you think you have no control when in reality you have more control than you think you do.
Is this idea along the lines of how elite performers pick themselves up when they stumble? I think from the outside looking in, it's like, hey, they're perfect. They never make a mistake. They're like clockwork. They do their training. They do all their stuff. But of course, they make mistakes. They're human, just like the rest of us. The difference is that they seem to be better at getting back on track and not letting little things become big things, whereas a lot of us in the general population will miss one workout, and one missed workout turns into 3 weeks off of the gym instead of like, oh, I'll just get back at it tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. There's one phrase that changed my life when it comes to consistency. And when I learned this phrase and I heard someone say it, not in a mental performance context, but when I heard them say it, I was like, oh my gosh, like I got to try that. Like I'm going to try this tool. And it was come on back.
Hmm.
So when you miss 4 days, it's just come on back. Come on back to you. Come on back to your goals. Come on back. So it's not condemning. It's not shaming. It's not condemning. It's an invitation. Hey, just come on back to what you know that you want. And come on back to your values. Come on back to the things that you said that you wanted. Just come on back. And that's all you have to do. And so I find myself saying that. I've had some injuries in the last year, and I just tell myself, you know what, just come on back. When you miss those multiple workouts and you eat some negative, meals that have a negative impact on you, just tell yourself, practice that really positive self talk, and just say, yeah, just come on back.
I like that. It makes us not hard on ourselves about the shortcomings or the stumblings, and knowing that we can always come on back to what we were doing. And really, that is the way that's the way that we try to preach in fitness is about it. Like this is such a long game that you're playing. It's really from now, this moment, until the rest of your life. Like
Hmm.
there's no failing unless you just decide to totally give up for forever, in which case you can also change your mind later. You can give up for 10 years and then change your mind in 10 years and be like, now I'm back in the game. And you
Yeah.
can still do that. I wouldn't advise that, but like you could do that. You never lose totally. So the idea of missing one workout, or having a cheat meal on the weekend or something like that was accidental, quote unquote accidental, and then letting it ruin the next 3 weeks or a month is a little bit silly once you can reframe the timeline that this
Hmm.
thing is going to take. And this is true for sure in all aspects of life. Like you have one bad day at work, at the office, you're not just going to get fired. You'd have to have a string of bad days along to them in a row without a good day in between, for something like that to happen. So you can always kind of come back and just go back to base principles and start over again, like as many times as needed.
Yeah. Well said.
What do you think about the people who are in this camp? Is it's not as common of a struggle, I think, the way that I'll phrase it. Um, but people who struggle with the anxiety of wanting more,
Mm.
they to get more out of life. They want to be in better shape. They want to make more money. They want to, get promoted. And they're like so worried about their future, even though they have the potential and they have the tools, but the anxiety about like, am I ready? Do I deserve this? It's a little bit of imposter syndrome, but it's also just anxiety about the future. How do you go about um, just sort of like wrestling with that and helping people to overcome that so that they can actually step into whatever's coming for them?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I think it comes from uh, going through a sequence of answering a set of questions that allows you to feel confident that you're on the right path. So it's really interesting. I read a study about how people feel satisfied in life, and basically what it comes back to this idea, and I felt very validated because I have been talking about like nothing feels, and a phrase I use oftentimes that I've been saying for about a decade: nothing feels as good as progress.
Hmm.
You don't even need to be or have arrived at something. But if you feel like you're making progress, it makes all the difference in the world. And so that's why I'm such a big advocate of just like, hey, what does progress look like to you? And so I read this study, and what they came up with was when people felt like they were moving in the right direction, which is another way to say making progress. So when they felt like they were making progress by moving in the right direction, it just unfolded so many great things in their life. And so I think there's some crucial questions to answer in the context of how you're asking it. So for example, in the way that I think about it, because I teach something called the game plan for life. So this is like, okay, well, you're a professional athlete or you're a high performer at what you're doing, but how can we spill over that mental success into the way that you just live your life? So all the different domains of your life. I mean, can you literally be a champion in all the different domains of your life? And I'm here to answer the question that you can. You literally can have that spill over into every area of your life. However, it does require you answer some really important questions. And number one is, who are you? Like, like you got to figure you out, and you have to figure out everything that you possibly can about yourself, because you're a puzzle. Like your job, like you're your greatest opponent, right? And you're also your greatest advocate. So it's like, well, you figure out your purpose. So that's, or your identity. That's number one. Number two is your purpose. Is like, why are you here? Like everybody asks themselves the existential question. It doesn't necessarily have to be a religious or spiritual one, but it is an existential question. Is why am I here? So who am I? Why am I here? And number three is, what's my calling in life? That means, well, like, what should I do with my life? So that's your calling. And then number four is you have assignments at different seasons of your life. So if we can figure out what your current assignment is in your life, then you can be all about that thing and succeed at that thing. And then we can figure out what is your personal philosophy. Like how should you wake up every day in order to accomplish all those things that are above that? Your identity, your purpose, your calling, your vision that you have for your life, and your unique strategy to get there. And then once we do that, is what's the executable plan that we have for you to succeed? And it's got to be simple and it's got to be easy. So going back to that win the day thing is a simple and easy thing. So it's like setting yourself up for success in all those different areas of your life that make all the difference. And I think it's helping people go from maybe a little bit of a anchorless life, or going from like people, a lot of people just kind of shoot in the dark with all these things. But if you were sure about all those things, imagine not spending the rest of your life trying to figure them out. But what if you knew them? What if you could figure it out and spend the rest of your life pursuing and executing on those things? It would be life changing.
Sorry for the small technical difficulty if there was something there. Well, hopefully that it comes out good on the back end. But as
Sure.
we're on the live recording here, um, what I was picking up from what you were saying, Gary, is that a lot of what that is doing is actually getting your thoughts out of your head and putting them on paper, or
Mm.
metaphorically on paper at least. And so it organizes them and helps you make sense of them so that it doesn't seem like such a mess, and it gives you a direction to aim at. Right? You talk about progress, and we want to make progress, and we can always discuss and argue and question about, well, what does progress look like? That can be a very simple question, is like, I lost 1 pound this week. or it can be a very difficult question, as in, my boss likes me a little bit better, so I'm more likely to get a promotion. It can be very different things, and sometimes measurable, sometimes not that measurable. And so what I'm hearing um, from your process there is that it helps you kind of just make sense of the mess in your head, and then allows you to choose a direction. And you do your best to hope that it's the correct direction, but you at least choose a direction to start aiming at and to start making progress at. And that's really what's going to kind of solve this anxiety issue.
Yeah, and I think it sort of I mean, there's an underlying stress, I think, when we're not moving in the right direction. Like there's an actual underlying
Mhm.
general stress. But when you have your idea and you have your plan that's identity based, like so I do what I call identity based mental performance. When it's you and you can figure you out and we can figure you out, then you can like spend the rest of your life just unpacking that. But you already know what the answers are. So it's like, no, go just go execute it. And when you can live your life that way, it's pretty joyful because then you open yourself up to all sorts of opportunities and really cool things. And I think finally it's like, well, yeah, we're showing progress, but to what end? And answering all those questions about your identity, your purpose, your calling, the vision that you have for your life, your personal philosophy, your current assignments, well, yeah, now I get to answer those questions. And yeah, you're going to be put in some uncomfortable situations where there's going to be some stress and anxiety, but those are performance based. They're not identity based questions. We need to get past the identity stuff so that you can go perform at a high level. So you're not questioning yourself or whether you should be there. Like, no, you're pretty confident on the plan. It's just a matter of execution.
This is kind of what I always say related to fitness, is that for the most part, we all know the things that we should be doing. It's just about doing them. Like, no one is sitting there, a burger or chicken salad. Which one of these things is like healthy, or which one of these things is going to get me closer to my health and fitness goals? Like, that's not a real question that we have. But it's, how do I choose the chicken salad more often than the burger and fries and Coke and whatever?
Hmm.
And there, I can't think of specific analogies, but in the business world, I'm sure there are things like, the things that you should be doing, and generally the things that you shouldn't be doing. It's just like, how do I execute on the quote unquote right things most of the time and more often than not? And if you find a way to do that, that's what leads you towards towards the end goal. And this is where coaching and having a framework and having a system and mentors and an accountability system really comes in handy.
Yeah, very much so. And I think it kind of goes back to that old idea, like, we want easy, right? So we want to put the right key in the door, and we just kind of want to walk through it, and the world opens up to us and say, oh yeah, this was the key. In reality, if you just work out your system, as imperfect as it is, if you just work out your system and you you execute on what you think you should do, you're probably going to be pretty successful. It's just that we give up so early on things.
Very well said, Gary. I think that this conversation is going to have a lot of good insights and kind of like those light bulb aha moments for people. And I think different things will hit differently, because all of this stuff is like, I mean, it's all the same with fitness stuff too. Is like, it's not new. It's just a different frame. Like like we just said, we know what we should be doing. It's just about actually doing them. So, hearing different phrases, different ways, hearing things framed in different ways is like, yeah, that's how it makes sense to me in my head, and now I can go and execute. So I appreciate you sharing these tips and these tactics and your life.
Yeah, and I would say one last thing is, like, make things simple, man. Like, life is already complicated, and as an athlete, one of the things that I hear over and over and over again is I think too much. And
Yeah,
so we want to limit the thoughts that we think. And so part of my job as a mental performance coach is to minimize the amount of thoughts that we have. And I say thoughts are like calories. The more that you're thinking about stuff and overthinking stuff, the more calories you're eating. Like, too many thoughts makes you feel slow and lethargic. And I think if you can minimize the thoughts to the ones that are helpful for you in producing the outcomes that you want, those are the things that you want to hyper focus on. Are you going to miss some thoughts? Yep, you sure are. And you're going to limit some thoughts. You're not going to think about some thoughts. Yeah, that's exactly right. But the best athletes make things really simple.
very well said, Gary. Where can people find you online and learn more about what you do, and inquire about your services for their team or for themselves or for their business?
Yeah, most of my athletes hang out on Instagram, and so that's where I am for the most part. So Elite Mindset on Instagram, and I'm the guy with the blue verification dot.
Awesome. I will tag that in the show notes as well. Gary, any last words that you want to say before we close off here?
Well, I think just finally, I appreciate you and what you're doing and helping people make things, and you're making things simple. And I think fitness it's so much of a mental game. Like it's so mental, and don't make it difficult on yourself. Make things as easy as you possibly can. Be consistent. Whatever time that you're waking up in the morning or time of the day that you're going, just dial into the consistency piece, and I think you're going to get there.
Awesome. Consistency is certainly the name of the game. So thank you very much, Gary. I appreciate your time very much. Everybody give Gary a follow on Instagram and reach out at Elite Mindset. And I'll put the links in the show notes to everything. And that's that. I appreciate everybody for listening. Thank you very much. Like, share, subscribe, send this to your friends who need to hear it. All those good things to help spread the good word. And that's that. Go outside, be a good person. See you next time.